On Larry King Now, Legion star Dan Stevens.
It wasn't deliberate on any part, but I'm sure it had something to do with, people's appetite for a show like this, that people are questioning the nature of reality very much at the moment.
Will we ever see other members of the X-Men universe in Legion?
In the X-Men universe, David Haller is the bastard son of Professor X, Charles Xavier, and yeah, there's every possibility that he might show up.
How do you prepare to be a beast?
I was thinking about this sort of aristocratic, vain young man who had suddenly been cursed with this hideous appearance and these teeth, and how he would want to sort of disguise them. And, spending all this time alone in this tower, he's sort of gotten very grumpy.
Plus, something you long believed to be true, but then realized wasn't.
That our leaders know what they're doing.
So all next on Larry King Now. Welcome to Larry King Now. Our special guest is Dan Stevens, acclaimed actor known for a wide range of film, television, and theater roles. He shot to fame playing Matthew Crawley on Downton Abbey, and we've seen him as the Beast in Disney's live-action film Beauty and the Beast, and Charles Dickens in The Man Who Invented Christmas. And now Dan stars in the X-Men-inspired sci-fi show Legion, entering its second season April 3rd at 10 p.m. on FX. Thank you for coming, Dan.
Thanks for having me.
This character you play in Legion has been described as a trippy, decadent fever dream and the best superhero on TV. This is a guy who was schizophrenic as a child. He's in a mental... Explain this.
It takes a bit of explaining. He was told he was schizophrenic for most of his life. And then, as with a lot of superhero stories, at a certain point in his life reveals, that that's not the full story, and that he actually has a number of different sort of mutant powers. But because of the nature of his illness, what it affords our show and our story is a real multitude of ways of exploring his story, his life, the way that he experiences and sees the world. It's a real trip.
Part of it real and part of it not real?
Well, that's a big question, and that's one of the big questions really that the show addresses really and plays with, is the nature of reality and what he perceives as real and unreal, and what we perceive as real and unreal. It's a very playful show for me and for the audience.
It was a comic book, right?
It was, and he's a character that's appeared over the decades. I think he first appeared in the early 80s, and then in the 90s and early aughts, and yeah, every so often an author, comic book artist will have a crack at him, and he occupies a very interesting corner of that X-Men universe.
What is meant by the title Legion?
Well, I mean, the biblical quote, "I am Legion, for we are many," he contains multitudes. I mean, he has, I think in the comic books, up to 500 different characters, different entities sort of playing around in his psyche.
Is it tough to play?
It is. It's certainly entertaining. I mean, it's challenging every single day. Every hour is different. It's never the same. It's rarely the same guy that I'm showing up to work to play, which keeps me entertained.
You've said in the past that it's a very interesting time to play a character who dances on the seam of reality.
Absolutely. I mean, I think, it wasn't deliberate on any part, but I'm sure it had something to do with people's appetite for a show like this, that people are questioning the nature of reality very much at the moment, and the theme of paranoia, and somebody who's been diagnosed a paranoid schizophrenic. The idea of paranoia has always fascinated me anyway, and I think increasingly we live in a very, very paranoid society, and since the 70s really, paranoia seems to have
it's worse every day,
right? I mean, it really is, and it's odd to me that phrases that you might think of as being part of the comic book universe are now entering our headlines. So the idea of a company mining data to exploit your inner demons. I saw that in a headline the other day, and it blew my mind. I was like, what are they talking about? And that's straight out of Legion.
Does he do any physical stuff?
You mean sort of kicking and punching sort of thing? He tends to outsource that to sort of certain entities. He's not so much the sort of kicky, punchy kind of guy. He's
Which
more
is rare for superheroes.
Right. It's more on a sort of psychic and psionic level. Lots of things take place on the astral plane, which is a fun, abstract space.
Where do you shoot?
The astral plane?
No, where do you shoot the whole series?
The first series was shot in Vancouver, and so when we would go out on location, we were in sort of lush green rainforest.
Beautiful city.
This season we've shot here in LA, and so we've been out in the desert in the Mojave, and I'd never been to the desert before, and that landscape has just completely blown my mind. It's incredible.
Yeah. You were abducted at the end of season 1.
I was.
Where do we find you to begin season 2?
Well, he's back. And,
he's back.
He's back, and he was abducted in this sort of strange orb, and so that takes a bit of explaining. And without giving too much away, he feels that he's been away for about 20 minutes, and for everybody else, it's been a year. And so that, you know, from the get-go of season 2, there's a lot of questions over, you know, how much do we trust him? How much do we trust his story? How much does he trust of what is being told? You know, has it really been a year, and what's happened in that year?
But David is not in the upcoming X-Men film, right?
Not so far as I know, no.
Will we ever see other members of the X-Men universe in Legion?
That's a good question. That's probably a question for some execs over at Fox rather than me. There's definitely scope for that. Again, you know, in the X-Men universe, David Haller is the bastard son of Professor X, Charles Xavier, played by Patrick Stewart and James McAvoy in the movies. So, you know, and he's definitely referred to and referenced throughout the seasons. And yeah, there's every possibility that he might show up.
The fans are fanatical, right?
They can be, and I think, you know, people who know who Legion is and what space he occupies in that universe are very excited that it's being done, because, as I say, he occupies this very magical, chaotic corner of that universe, and he has a multitude of abilities, and it really sort of, the landscape of the X-Men universe really shifts when he comes to town. It's not, you know, a guy who just has the ability to make something fly with his hand. It's a whole world of things, and so the possibilities are really endless and weird.
After the break with Dan Stevens, we'll look back at some of Dan's other fan-favorite roles. Stay with us. We're back with Dan Stevens. Dan's superhero show Legion, the second season, premieres on April 3rd at 10 p.m. on FX, touching some other bases. I hear you are a fan of cricket.
Ah.
Okay, I am a sports fan. I am a baseball fanatic. I love sports. I was in South Africa about 10 years ago on a speaking tour for a bank, and the bankers who booked me and traveled around with me were fanatic cricket fans.
Sure, yeah.
So I would watch cricket every night on the telly.
Okay.
I didn't understand a thing, and it's the end of a week, and I still don't understand a thing.
Right. It's, yeah, I mean, I suppose a little like baseball. I mean, I'm slowly getting my head around baseball. It's probably the closest.
I think it preceded baseball.
Yes, sure, yeah. I think it was invented some time in the 17th or 18th century on sort of bumpy fields.
There's a bowler, and he throws it underhand, and they run, and they could play for hours.
Yeah, and I guess a little like baseball, it requires a number of different kinds of player. So you have, you know, your fast bowlers and spin bowlers, and the sort of different strategy of attack, different kind of batsmen, you know, very, very defensive, and
wickets,
your big hitters, and yeah, wickets and all sorts. I mean, there's all sorts of crazy terminology as well. Silly mid-off is a position I've always enjoyed. But I mean, it would take a lot longer than this this little interview for me to really explain cricket.
Have you ever been to a Dodger game?
I have. I actually went to some of the World Series last year. It was fantastic. Yeah.
Can a cricket fan quickly adapt to baseball?
I don't know about quickly, but it's certainly the closest thing you guys have over here, and I'm definitely getting into baseball more so than football. Football is something it still really eludes me. The whole playbook.
We call baseball a mental game on a physical field.
Right.
It's a
well, cricket is,
game
I
of
guess,
the mind.
pretty similar to that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
You started in theater.
I did. Right. Yeah.
Was the transformation to camera easy?
Depends what you mean. I mean, in terms of the...
When you have to underplay
the
on
craft,
camera, right?
I guess. I mean, I think it's more in terms of like how you go about pursuing those roles and things that is a different game. But
A
actually,
lot of film actors are afraid of theatre.
yeah, I mean, it's quite a terrifying format because it's just, you know, it's you and your memory and ability, you know,
Curtain opens and
raw
it's you.
in front of a live audience. I mean, but that's what makes it magical. You know, I think when theatre is great, it takes a lot of beating. I mean, it's so rarely great. That's the problem. But when it is great, it is truly magical because you are right in the presence of this thing happening. Film is so manipulative and
Oh, yeah.
you know, so I mean, I enjoy both, and I haven't done theatre for a couple of years, but I would love to go and do a play.
What was your big break, Dan?
I mean, I feel like there's a number of, you know, I feel like my first job, you know, was probably a big break, but then there've been others along the way. I did a mini-series for the BBC, an adaptation of a book called The Line of Beauty, that was set in the 80s about a young gay man in London in the 80s, and that was, for me, that was a big landmark. That was my first big screen role, and yeah, really getting to grips with some wonderful material, and yeah, so I suppose, I mean, that felt like a big...
Downton Abbey was big.
Downton Abbey was huge. I mean, that was, but that was huge for all of us, I think, you know.
Beauty and the Beast, one of the biggest films of 2017. How do you prepare to be a beast?
My whole life.
How do you get into a beast?
Yeah, I mean, there were a number of different ways of looking at that. I mean, physically and technologically, it was a huge leap for me to be working in stilts in a mocap suit and all the, you know, the incredible advanced technology that was used on that project. I mean, no one had ever really used the technology that we were using, that facial capture, for a lead romantic role, singing. It had never been used before. So I was looking to all these guys who, you know, had invented this kit, and they were sort of like, I don't know if this is going to work, but, you know, we were all just diving into it together, and it felt very, very exciting.
What was it like when you saw it?
Magical. I mean, because the first time I saw a cut of that film, I was still in the grey mocap suit on stilts, lumbering about, and everything else looked gorgeous and colourful and perfect, and there was me yet to be rendered. And then I saw, you know, every few months I'd go in and see a cut, and it would be slightly more finished, and I'd, you know, it's like digitized sort of beast was coming out. And I was thinking, okay, I hope it looks a little bit better than this. But
how'd you come up with the voice?
The voice came out of, it really came out of some teeth that were made for me. They developed some fangs for me to explore what it would be like to wear, for him to have these fangs.
That would change your voice?
Yeah.
So you spoke regularly?
Well, I was thinking about this sort of aristocratic, vain young man who had suddenly been cursed with this hideous appearance and these teeth, and how he would want to sort of disguise them. And, you know, spending all this time alone in this tower, he's sort of gotten very grumpy and lonely, and sort of the larynx tilts and the mouth downturns, and suddenly you've got this sort of beastly voice came out, and that was how he spoke and sang.
Did you have to find it every day?
No, I think once I find a voice, I can tap into it pretty quickly. But it was fun to explore and just, you know, to find that through a prosthetic set of teeth. You know.
Our guest is Dan Stevens. X-Men inspired sci-fi show Legion enters its second season April 3rd at 10 p.m. on FX. After the break, we'll get into things like Dan's guilty pleasure, strangest job he ever had, the answers to those questions and more in a round of If You Only Knew. Don't click away. We're back with Dan Stevens. We play a little game of If You Only Knew.
Okay.
You do not have to answer. It is not a court.
Not obliged. Okay, good.
Secret talent.
Well, I guess it's not so secret anymore, but I can make a malt ball levitate.
You can what?
They call them Maltesers in England, but you know those little chocolate malt balls?
Yeah.
I can make one levitate. There you go.
You got one with you?
I don't.
Okay. Guilty pleasure.
Oh, God.
Make a...
So many.
Oh, levitate. Okay, go ahead.
He's going to be thinking about that for days. So, my guilty pleasure, God. I don't know.
Chocolate, anything that you...
Oh, vegan ice cream.
Vegan ice cream. It's pretty good, by the way.
I guess it's less guilty if it's vegan, isn't it?
Yeah. There's a place called Craig's here in L.A.
Oh, yeah. It's
Great
delicious.
place, and they have great vegan ice cream.
Yeah.
Person you trade places with for a day.
I can't think.
Who's your favorite comedian?
Favorite comedian? Sarah Silverman.
Yeah, very funny.
I love her.
What keeps you up at night?
My kids.
How many?
3.
Boy, girl?
Girl, boy, girl. And the youngest is particularly keeping us up at night at the moment. So, yeah.
How old?
She's almost 2. Terrible 2.
Terrible twos.
Oh, yeah, it's on the way.
What's the strangest job you've ever had?
Strangest job I ever had was screening people by phone to work for a bank and asking them basic math questions. It was pretty odd.
I would say, this is weird. If you could speak to an animal, which animal would you choose?
I frequently speak to my cats and ask them why they stink so much.
Cats are strange, aren't they?
Oh, they're pretty weird, yeah.
Proudest accomplishment?
Probably my kids, I think, yeah.
What never fails to make you laugh?
My kids. I'm going to just say my kids for all the answers to this. But
You
yeah.
like living in the American West and the Canadian West where you shot?
Yeah, I do, yeah.
Someone from history you'd like to portray on screen?
Ooh.
You did Dickens.
I did Dickens. One day I'd love to play Walt Whitman.
Walt Whitman.
Yeah.
Great American poet.
Yeah. I might have to wait till I'm a little older, but he was a young man once, I guess.
Who was a dream co-star?
Lupita Nyong'o. I just plucked that out of thin air, but I love her.
Something you wish you were better at?
Cricket.
Oh, you play?
I mean, I play. I'm terrible, but I'd love to be better.
Favorite video game of all time?
Oh, FIFA soccer.
Weirdest fan encounter?
The other day I was at an event and a very glamorous woman stumbled out of a porta potty and I went to go and help her. She looked like she was going to stumble and she looked up and it was Joan Collins. And she said, "Oh, Dan, I loved you as Dickens."
She's still beautiful.
She is, and she's clearly got great taste.
She's 85.
Is she really?
Yeah.
Well, she didn't look it.
And coming out of a porta potty?
She really was.
What annoys you the most?
Social media, probably, and what it's done to our society and people.
Is your oldest child using it?
No, God, no. She's just got an email address, and it's very sweet.
Where do they start?
That's as far as it goes so far.
You're not going to let her get an iPhone?
Oh, I mean, I'm sure it'll happen eventually. But
How old is the
she's only
oldest?
8, so. Yeah.
Oh, it'll be next year.
Well, maybe. She wants to get her ears pierced at the moment, and I'm holding off on that for a bit. So.
What's your favorite thing about Hollywood?
The weather.
Least favorite thing about Hollywood?
The traffic.
Something you long believed to be true, but then realized wasn't.
That our leaders know what they're doing.
And tell me something people don't know about you.
God, I don't know.
Okay, what's the toughest role you ever had?
Toughest role I ever had was probably a movie I did last year called Apostle that's coming out later this year with a director called Gareth Evans, a Welsh director, which we shot in Wales last spring.
And why was it tough?
I mean, it was shot in Wales in the spring, which is probably the toughest thing, but no, it was a very, very grueling shoot. It was wonderfully challenging, but a very, very tough shoot.
Our final moments with Legion star Dan Stevens right after the break. We're back with Legion star Dan Stevens. Second season starts April 3rd at 10 p.m. on FX. Tina Margota on the Larry King Now blog. Some questions on the internet.
Oh, God.
How difficult was it to play the Beast in Beauty and the Beast? And can you give us a little of his voice?
Well, I've given you a little of the voice, I guess, already. I mean, the most challenging thing, I think, was probably the stilts and learning to waltz.
How do you walk on
stilts?
stilts?
With great difficulty. And
Did you fall?
Once or twice. I don't think it was quite captured on camera, but there was a lot of back and forth with the team of engineers who were basically charged with modifying these things as we went through the 5-month shoot. And
had you sung before Beauty and the Beast?
I had. I mean, never on that scale, and never singing a brand new Alan Menken song. So it was exciting.
You enjoy singing?
I do.
At DJ Habital on Twitter, what went into preparing for the part on Legion?
A lot of things. I mean, a lot of interesting research, conversations with some paranoid schizophrenics, some psychologists and psychiatrists.
You met with paranoid schizophrenics?
Oh yeah, yeah, and also, I mean, the internet is a wealth of you know, information and videos, people's testimonies. But no, I met with some sufferers and patients and doctors, and it's fascinating, just amazing. Well,
they can be highly intelligent.
Oh yeah, I mean, there are high-functioning CEOs
but move from one subject to another in a second.
Absolutely, yeah, it really is a fascinating condition, and it was a great privilege to sort of just, you know, borrow some of that world and bring it into the show.
Sydney Barrett's on Twitter. Can you tell me 2 truths and 1 lie about season 2?
There is a mouse in season 2.
Mouse, that's a truth.
There is a cow in season 2.
That's a truth.
There is a giraffe in season 2.
That's a lie.
Oh.
Which one are?
Now, how was it 2 truths and a lie?
2 truths and a lie.
You knew that
I don't know.
You got it in one. That was. I feel like we should play that again.
Okay. Kelsey McCullough on Facebook. Where do you think you got those beautiful eyes from?
Oh, I'm sure from my mother.
Are they blue? Yes.
Pretty blue.
Yeah. At Dan Stevens on Twitter.
That's not me?
No, not
someone,
you.
Someone, okay.
How many pairs of Doc Martens do you own?
Oh, God. It's well into double figures.
What are Doc Martens?
What are Doc Martens? These are Doc Martens.
The shoes?
Yeah, yeah. British shoemaker. They were
What
made famous by the punks, I think, in the 70s. But
what makes them great?
They're very comfortable, and they make them in all sorts of weird colors and shapes and sizes.
Expensive?
Not particularly, but they're fun.
And Otto Paulina on Twitter. What projects do you have in the works? And you've already told us about The Apostle.
Apostle is coming up. What else is in the works? There's a couple of things. That's the only one I think coming out later this year. Yeah, no, there's a couple of things that are bubbling away that I can't quite talk about yet. But yeah.
Any return to theater?
I hope so. Yeah, very much. Yeah, in the next couple of years, I hope. That's one of the things that's bubbling away.
Great pleasure meeting you.
Nice to meet you. Thank you so much.
Big thanks to my guest, Dan Stevens. Be sure to tune into the 2nd season of Legion, premiering April 3rd at 10 p.m. on FX. As always, you can find me on Twitter at King's Things, and I'll see you next time.